the couple on Willow Creek Road. I didn't understand what Mrs. Whitaker meant when she said, "Don't let the house get too quiet." At the time, I thought it was just something older people said when they were trying to be mysterious. Now, whenever I hear a house settle at night or a refrigerator stop humming in the dark, I think of that sentence. I think of her pale smile, her husband standing behind her without blinking, and the way their driveway disappeared into the pine trees like a road that did not want to be found. This happened 8 years ago, when I was 37 and living outside Asheville, North Carolina. I had recently separated from my wife, and I was staying in a small apartment above a hardware store while I tried to put my life back together. I worked remotely as an insurance claims adjuster, which sounds more impressive than it was. Mostly, I sat at a laptop reading reports about water damage, roof leaks, and people arguing over deductibles. Money was tight, pride was tighter. So when a woman from my church, Linda Morris, asked if I would be interested in watching a house for a retired couple while they went to Charleston for a medical appointment, I said yes before asking many questions. "It's only 4 nights," Linda told me after Sunday service. "They have 2 indoor cats, some plants, and a security system they don't really understand. Easy money." The couple were named Frank and Margaret Whitaker. They lived about 20 minutes outside town on Willow Creek Road, which was really less of a road and more of a narrow strip of cracked asphalt winding through old farmland and woods. Their house sat behind a locked iron gate at the end of a long gravel drive. It was a white 2-story farmhouse with green shutters, a wide porch, and a red barn leaning at the back of the property. From a distance, it looked peaceful. Up close, something about it felt too carefully arranged. The porch chairs were perfectly aligned. The bird feeders hung at identical heights. Even the firewood beside the door had been stacked so neatly it looked decorative. There were cameras above the garage, under the porch roof, at the corners of the barn, and one small black dome camera above the back door. I noticed all of them before I noticed the cats. Mrs. Whitaker opened the door before I knocked. She was a thin woman in her late 60s with silver hair pinned tightly behind her head. Her husband stood a few feet behind her, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a flannel shirt buttoned all the way to the top despite the warm weather. He had the kind of face that might have looked friendly if he had ever allowed it to move. "You must be Nathan," she said. "Yes, ma'am. Come in. We like to know who's in our home before we leave it." It was an odd thing to say, but I smiled and stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Lemon cleaner, old wood, and something metallic underneath. The house was spotless, not clean in a normal way, but clean like a museum after closing. No shoes by the door, no mail on the table, no blanket tossed over the sofa, nothing that suggested 2 people actually lived there. Mrs. Whitaker gave me the tour. Frank followed us from room to room without speaking. She showed me the kitchen, the guest bathroom, the laundry room, the den, and the upstairs hallway. Every door was opened for me, then closed again as soon as I had looked inside. At the end of the upstairs hall, there was one door she did not open. "That room stays locked," she said. I nodded, waiting for an explanation. She gave none. The cats, Samson and Delilah, were old and heavy and watched me from under the dining room table. I was told to feed them twice a day, scoop the litter box in the mudroom, water the ferns on the porch, and bring in any packages. "The alarm is simple," Frank finally said, his voice low and dry. "Stay mode at night. Away mode if you leave. Don't forget." "I won't." "And if something trips it," he added, "don't panic." Mrs. Whitaker touched his arm, very lightly, and his mouth closed. Before they left, she handed me a yellow notepad with instructions written in neat cursive. At the bottom of the page, underlined twice, were the words, "Keep some noise on after dark." I thought she meant for the cats. "What does this mean?" I asked. Mrs. Whitaker looked past me toward the hallway. "The house feels better with sound in it." Frank picked up their suitcase and said, "Margaret." She smiled again. Radio, television, anything. Don't let the house get too quiet. That should have been enough for me to decline the job. But I needed the money, and I was tired of seeing danger in every uncomfortable conversation. Divorce does that to you. It makes you distrust your instincts because you spent years being told they were wrong. The first night was uneventful. I worked from the kitchen table, kept an old country station playing on a small radio near the sink, fed the cats, and slept in the guest room downstairs. The bed was stiff, but I was grateful for a quiet place that didn't smell like the hardware store below my apartment. The second day, I noticed the barn door was open. It had been closed the day before. I was sure of that. The barn sat maybe 40 yards from the house, past a patch of brown grass and a broken stone bird bath. I stood at the kitchen window for a while, coffee in hand, watching the dark opening. I texted Mrs. Whitaker, "Barn door is open. Should I close it?" She replied almost immediately, "No need. Wind does that." There had been no wind. That evening, after feeding the cats, I walked outside and pushed the barn door shut anyway. The inside smelled like dust and damp hay. I didn't go in far. I saw old tools on the wall, a riding mower, some stacked plastic bins, and a tarp-covered shape in the back that might have been furniture. As I turned to leave, I heard a phone ringing. Not my cell phone, not from the house, from somewhere inside the barn. It rang 3 times, stopped, then rang once more. I stood there with one hand on the door, listening to the silence that followed. Then I did what most people do when something scares them and they don't want to admit it. I pretended I hadn't heard it. I shut the barn and went back inside. That night, the power flickered just after 11. The radio clicked off. The refrigerator stopped humming. The whole house seemed to inhale and hold its breath. I was in the den, half watching a baseball game, when Samson lifted his head from the rug and stared toward the hallway. Delilah slipped off the armchair and went under the sofa. Then came a sound from upstairs, a slow dragging noise. Not a footstep, not pipes, something heavy being pulled across a wooden floor. I muted the television. The sound stopped. I turned the volume back up. A minute later, it started again. I told myself it was an old house. I told myself the Whitakers probably had raccoons in the attic. I told myself a lot of things while sitting there with the remote in my hand, too afraid to stand up. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Frank. "You still downstairs?" I stared at the message. They were supposed to be in Charleston. I had not told them anything was happening. "Yes," I typed. "Everything okay?" His reply came 10 seconds later. "Keep the TV on." I felt a cold pressure settle behind my ribs. I looked up at the small black camera in the corner of the den. I had not noticed it during the tour. It was tucked high on a bookshelf between 2 porcelain birds, angled directly at the sofa. I stood and walked into the kitchen. There was another camera near the pantry, half hidden behind a hanging plant. That was when I realized the cameras were not just outside. They were watching inside too. I called Linda. She didn't answer. I called again. Voicemail. The dragging sound continued above me, moving from one side of the house to the other. It was steady now, patient. Every few seconds, there was a soft bump, as if whatever was being dragged had caught on the floorboards. I grabbed my keys from the counter and decided I was leaving. I would come back in the morning with Linda, or the sheriff, or anyone who could tell me I was overreacting. But when I opened the front door, the alarm began screaming. The sound was so loud I stumbled backward. Red lights flashed on the keypad in the hallway. Samson hissed from somewhere under the table. My phone started ringing. "Mrs. Whitaker." I answered with shaking hands. "Nathan," she said calmly. "You opened the door." "I'm leaving." "No, you're frightened. There's something upstairs." A pause. Then, very softly, she said, "Did it come out?" My mouth went dry. "What?" Frank's voice came on the line. farther away. Ask him if he opened the room. I didn't open anything, I said. Mrs. Whitaker breathed out, almost relieved. Then listen to me. Turn off the alarm. Go back to the den. Put the television on loud. Do not go upstairs. Who is up there? No answer. Mrs. Whitaker, who is in this house? The dragging above me stopped. The sudden silence was worse. Then 3 knocks came from the ceiling directly over my head. Not random knocks. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Mrs. Whitaker whispered, "Oh, Nathan." The call ended. I don't remember deciding to run, only moving. I punched at the alarm keypad until it stopped screaming, grabbed a fireplace poker from beside the mantel, and backed into the kitchen. The back door was closer than the front. I figured if the alarm went off again, I would ignore it and keep going. Before I reached it, the kitchen radio turned on by itself. Static filled the room, then a woman's voice came through, faint and broken. "Margaret?" I froze. The voice did not sound like it was coming from a broadcast. It sounded like someone speaking into an old microphone from another room. "Margaret, I'm cold." The radio clicked off. I threw the back door open and ran. The alarm screamed behind me, but I didn't stop. I crossed the yard toward my truck, gravel biting through the thin soles of my shoes. Halfway there, floodlights snapped on across the property. Every camera's little red eye glowed in the dark. That was when I saw the upstairs window. The locked room at the end of the hall faced the driveway. A figure stood behind the glass, not clearly, just a pale shape, tall and narrow, with one hand pressed flat against the window. I got into my truck and locked the doors. The engine turned over on the second try. As I backed down the driveway, my phone buzzed again. A text from Mrs. Whitaker. "Please don't call anyone yet. We can explain." I almost laughed. It came out like a cough. Another message followed. "She is confused at night." Then another. "She has never heard a guest." I drove straight to the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office. It is strange what embarrassment will do to a grown man. Even after everything I had seen, part of me expected the deputy at the desk to smirk. Part of me worried I would sound like a child describing a ghost story. But I showed him the messages. His expression changed before I finished talking. 2 deputies followed me back to Willow Creek Road. By then, it was almost 1 in the morning. The Whitaker's gate was open. The house was lit from top to bottom. Frank's truck was parked beside the garage. They were home. I knew then they had never gone to Charleston. Mrs. Whitaker met the deputies on the porch wearing a robe and slippers. Frank stood behind her, arms crossed. They both looked tired, not surprised. The deputies separated us. One stayed with me near the driveway while the other spoke to the Whitakers. I could hear only pieces. Family matter, medical condition, misunderstanding. Then one deputy asked to see the locked room. Mrs. Whitaker started crying. It was not loud crying. No sobbing, just tears sliding down a face that seemed too practiced at holding itself still. They found her sister upstairs. Her name was Evelyn. She was 72 years old, severely mentally ill and, according to the Whitakers, afraid of hospitals. They said they had been caring for her privately for years. They said she became agitated by silence, wandered at night, and sometimes dragged furniture across the room. They said the cameras were there to monitor her and to make sure she didn't hurt herself. Maybe some of that was true, but it did not explain why the room locked from the outside. It did not explain the barn phone. It did not explain why they had lied about leaving town. And it did not explain the notebook a deputy later found in the kitchen drawer, the one with names, dates, and short notes written in Margaret's careful handwriting. Linda M. stayed 2 nights, heard movement, paid extra. Ray P. left early, too nervous. Nathan Cole, good candidate, alone, no close family nearby. I never saw the full investigation. I was not family, and no one owed me answers. The official story, as far as I understood it, was elder neglect and unlawful restraint. The Whitakers' adult son came from Knoxville to handle the property. Evelyn was taken somewhere safe. Linda cried when she apologized to me, insisting she had no idea anything like that was happening. I believed her, mostly. A month later, I received an envelope at my apartment with no return address. Inside was a check for the exact amount the Whitakers had promised to pay me, plus an extra $500. There was also a note written in Margaret's cursive. "You did the right thing. I am sorry we made you part of it." I tore up the check. I kept the note for almost a year before throwing it away. I am 45 now. I live in Raleigh, in a condo with neighbors on both sides and traffic noise outside my window. Some people complain about noise. I find it comforting. Every once in a while, someone asks why I don't like staying in quiet country houses. I usually say I'm just a city person now. The truth is, quiet houses have memories. And sometimes, if people are desperate enough, cruel enough, or lonely enough, they will build a whole life around keeping those memories locked in a room upstairs. Moral: when someone tells you not to let a house get too quiet, listen carefully. They may not be warning you about the house. They may be warning you about themselves. Story 2. The House That Knows Everything. I learned something in northern Idaho that I wish someone had told me sooner. When a couple rents you a beautiful house for almost nothing, they may not be trying to help you. They may be buying themselves a show. I was 32 then, recently divorced, and trying to rebuild my life without admitting how badly it had fallen apart. I moved from Spokane to a small town near Coeur d'Alene because it was cheaper and quieter. The truth was that I needed a place where nobody knew me. I worked remotely for a medical supply company. As long as I had internet, I could answer calls and emails from anywhere. That was how Linda, a woman from my old church, found me a temporary place. She said an older couple she knew, Howard and Elise Whitaker, were leaving for Arizona for a few weeks. They needed someone to stay at their house, feed their 2 dogs, bring in the mail, and keep the pipes from freezing. The strange part was the price, $200 for the whole month. I asked Linda why it was so cheap. She shrugged and said, "They're private people. They don't trust everybody." I should have heard the warning in that sentence. Instead, I heard free heat, quiet rooms, and a chance to save money. The Whitaker house sat off Black Pine Road, 15 minutes outside town, past a closed diner and a long stretch of pine woods. It was a large cedar-sided place with a stone chimney, a detached garage, and a porch that wrapped around the front like something from a real estate website. Behind it, the yard sloped toward a creek and thick trees. Howard met me at the door. He was tall and thin, with silver hair and sharp eyes. Elise stood beside him with both hands folded at her waist. She smiled gently, but there was something practiced about it. "You must be Daniel," she said. "We're grateful you could help." They showed me around slowly. Howard opened every closet himself and stood there while I looked inside. Elise explained the thermostat, the generator, the dog food, the Wi-Fi, and the rules for the mail. Their 2 old yellow labs, Rusty and June, followed us quietly from room to room. The house was spotless but strangely empty. No family photos, no birthday cards, no magnets on the fridge. Just expensive furniture, shelves of books, and framed landscapes that looked like they came with the house. Then I noticed the cameras. One above the porch, one over the driveway, one aimed at the garage, one pointed toward the back deck. Inside, there was a camera in the kitchen and another in the hallway. Howard saw me looking at the hallway camera. "Insurance," he said. Elise nodded. "We had some trouble with trespassers a few years ago." Before they left, Howard handed me a printed list. Most of it was normal. Feed the dogs at 7 and 6. Bring the mail in before dark. Let the faucets drip if the temperature dropped too low. The last 3 rules stayed in my head. Do not enter the locked storage room beside the garage. Do not disable any cameras. If the dogs bark toward the woods at night, do not go outside. I asked if there were bears. Howard and Elise looked at each other for half a second. Coyotes, Howard said. But that was not a look people give each other over coyotes. They drove away just before sunset in a white Ford Explorer with Arizona plates. I watched the taillights disappear and tried to convince myself I had gotten lucky. A warm house, 2 quiet dogs, fast internet, and almost no rent. For once, life seemed to be giving me a break. The first night was peaceful. I worked in Howard's office, ate leftovers Elise had labeled for me, fed the dogs, and sat by the fireplace while the wind moved through the pines. Around 10, Rusty lifted his head and stared toward the kitchen hallway. June did the same. Neither dog barked. They just listened. I told myself old dogs hear things people don't. The second night, the driveway camera went black. Howard had told me I could keep the camera feed open on the monitor in his office. At 9:43 p.m., the driveway view flickered once and disappeared. I texted him. Driveway cam went offline. Everything else is fine. He answered almost immediately. Probably weather. Don't worry about it. That bothered me. His reply came so fast it felt like he had been waiting. 10 minutes later, both dogs jumped up and ran to the back door, barking so hard their old bodies shook. I grabbed a flashlight and looked through the glass. The back deck was empty. The yard was empty. Beyond the creek, the trees stood black and still. But the dogs kept barking at the same spot near the tree line. I remembered the rule and stayed inside. I got the dogs back with treats, locked the dog door, and wedged a kitchen chair under the handle. It was probably useless. At 3 in the morning, I woke to a sound downstairs. Not a crash, not a creak, a single careful step. I lay there staring at the ceiling until the house went quiet again. In the morning, the chair was back at the kitchen table. The dog door was unlocked. Rusty and June were outside near the creek. For several minutes, I just stood there, trying to convince myself I had moved the chair before bed, but I remembered pushing it under the handle. I remembered the scrape of its legs against the tile. I called Linda because I felt ridiculous calling the sheriff over a chair. She came over 20 minutes later wearing a winter coat over pajamas. "You're sure?" she asked. "I'm sure." We searched the house. Every room, every closet, the pantry, the basement utility area. The only place we skipped was the locked storage room. Linda tried to smile. Stress does strange things, Daniel. I wanted to believe her. But before she left, she looked back at the house and said, "Keep your phone charged, okay?" That did not sound like someone who thought it was just stress. Over the next few days, little things changed. A mug I left in the sink would be rinsed and placed upside down. The chair in Howard's office would be lowered after I had raised it. The dogs sometimes sat facing the hallway camera. I texted Elise and asked if anyone else had a key. She replied, "Why? Is something wrong?" I had not said anything was wrong. I wrote back, "No, just asking." A minute later, she answered, "You're safe there, Daniel." That sentence made my stomach tighten. On the 5th night, all the cameras went offline one by one. Porch first, then garage, then back deck, then the kitchen and hallway cameras. Each feed froze, flickered, and cut to black. I texted Howard, "All cameras are down." No answer. I called, straight to voicemail. The house felt different without the cameras. Once the screens went black, I realized I had been relying on them. Without them, every window felt open. At 11:18 p.m., someone knocked on the back door. 3 slow knocks. The dogs did not bark. They only lifted their heads, looked toward the kitchen, and lowered them again, like they recognized the person outside. I picked up the fireplace poker and stood in the living room. Another knock came. Then my phone buzzed. Elise, don't open the back door. I nearly dropped the phone. I called her. No answer. Another message appeared. Stay where you are. I looked toward the dead hallway camera. There was no way she could know where I was unless she could still see me. I backed away from the kitchen and closed the living room curtains. Then I went room to room, closing every curtain I could find. At midnight, I heard the garage side door open. A soft click. A rubber seal pulling loose. Then a careful step into the mudroom. I had checked that door earlier. It had been locked. My phone buzzed again. Howard, go check the garage. Wind may have blown the door open. I stared at the message, shaking. I typed, I'm calling the sheriff. Howard replied, that would be embarrassing for you. Then another message came. We trusted you with our home. That was when fear turned into anger. I called 911 and told the dispatcher someone might be inside the house and that the owners were sending strange messages even though they were supposed to be out of state. She told me to leave if I could do it safely. I grabbed my keys and went to the front door. As I reached it, the porch light clicked on by itself. Through the narrow glass beside the door, I saw a person standing at the edge of the driveway, just a dark figure in the snow. My phone buzzed. Elise, front door isn't a good idea. That was when I understood. The cameras were not down. They were only down for me. Someone else could still see everything. I went through the kitchen and slipped out the sliding door onto the back deck. The dogs followed me, whining, but I could not take them through the woods. I whispered that I was sorry and stepped into the snow. I moved down the deck stairs and around the side of the house toward my car. Then I saw the white Ford Explorer parked behind the detached garage. Arizona plates. Snow had melted under the engine. They were not in Arizona. Maybe they never had been. The garage side door opened. Howard stepped out wearing gloves and a flannel shirt. Behind him, inside the garage, Elise stood near a workbench holding a tablet. On the screen were clear, active camera feeds. For 1 second, nobody moved. Then Howard said calmly, "You weren't supposed to come this way." I ran, not to my car. Panic made that decision for me. I ran toward the trees. Branches hit my face. Snow filled my shoes. I heard Howard shout behind me. Not angry, just irritated, like I had ruined a game. I crossed the creek, soaked one leg to the knee, and kept going until I saw headlights through the trees. An old pickup was crawling down Black Pine Road. I stumbled into the road, waving both arms. The driver nearly hit me. He was an older man named Earl. When he saw my face, the fireplace poker in my hand, and the blood on my cheek, he unlocked the passenger door without asking many questions. "Sheriff's office," I said. "Please." On the way into town, my phone buzzed one last time. "Elise, you should have stayed inside." Deputies went to the Whitaker house that night. Howard and Elise answered the door in robes and acted confused. They said they had returned early because Elise was not feeling well. They said I had been acting unstable and sending strange texts. They admitted the cameras worked, but claimed they only checked them after I started panicking. The Explorer was in the garage. The tablet was gone. Deputies found no signs of forced entry, no hidden person, no evidence that anyone had chased me. One deputy suggested I had misread things. I asked him how Elise knew not to open the back door. He had no answer. I left town 2 days later. A month after that, I searched property records and old rental pages. The Whitakers had rented that same house to 3 short-term tenants in the previous 2 years. None stayed longer than a week. One man had filed a report about harassment by unknown persons. A woman had left a deleted review. The cached preview still showed one sentence: "Owners are watching everything. Do not stay here." I never found out why they did it. Maybe they were bored. Maybe they liked watching people break. Maybe they had convinced themselves they were testing strangers. People like that always find a story where they are the victims. I'm 36 now, and I still hate staying in private homes. Hotels are fine, apartments are fine, but houses with too many cameras make me uneasy, especially when the owners are polite and explain everything too carefully. Because once you realize the people you feared outside are the same people who handed you the keys, you stop trusting locked doors. The lesson is simple. If someone rents you a house too cheaply, they may not be giving you shelter. They may be buying themselves entertainment. Story 3. The House on Black Hollow Road. If an elderly couple ever offers you good money to stay in their house for 3 nights, do not ask how much they are paying first. Ask why their neighbors stop talking the moment you mention their name. I am not telling this story because I enjoy scaring people. I am 50 years old now. At my age, a man does not look for thrills. He looks for quiet mornings, honest work, a decent cup of coffee, and a night of sleep that does not end with him sitting upright in bed, listening for a voice in the hallway. Back then, I was living outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, in a rented room above a tire shop. My appliance repair business had folded that winter. After the divorce, I told everyone I was fine, but pride does not keep the lights on. By February, I was taking any job that paid cash and did not ask too many questions. The offer came through a woman named Linda Moore, one of my old customers. She called and said a couple she knew needed someone dependable to watch their house while they drove to Pittsburgh for a few medical appointments. 3 nights, nothing complicated. Feed the cat, check the furnace, open the greenhouse for a little while in the afternoon. That was all. Then she told me what they were willing to pay. It was too much money for a simple house-sitting job. I knew that even before I said yes. But when you are counting quarters for gas, suspicion becomes a luxury. The house sat off Black Hollow Road, about 40 minutes west of town, in a small wooded community that barely deserved to be called a town. There was one gas station, a Dollar General, a church with a leaning steeple, and a diner that looked as if it had not changed its menu since 1983. I arrived on a Saturday afternoon. I had expected a modest country home, maybe a ranch house with a porch and a few acres behind it. What I found was a large brick house behind a tall black fence, set back from the road beneath old pine trees that seemed to swallow the daylight. The gate had a brand new video doorbell, but next to it hung an old rusted chain and a padlock that looked like something from a barn. The place had that strange feeling old houses sometimes have, as if one decade had been nailed over another and neither had fully disappeared. The woman who answered the door introduced herself as Margaret Collins. She was small, neat, and carefully dressed, with silver hair pinned close to her head and soft blue eyes that never quite stayed still. Behind her stood her husband, Walter. He was tall and narrow, with a straight back and a face so controlled it made him look less calm than unfinished. They were polite, too polite maybe. Margaret smiled warmly and called me Mr. Hayes, even after I told her my first name was Daniel. Walter shook my hand and held it a second longer than he needed to, studying me the way a mechanic might study a part before deciding whether it could still be used. They showed me the house, living room, kitchen, a small guest bedroom where I would sleep, a sunroom full of plants, the furnace room, the greenhouse, out back. Everything was clean and expensive, but somehow lifeless. There were no family photos in the hall, no Christmas cards on the fridge, no old vacation pictures, nothing that proved anyone had ever been happy there. What the house did have was clocks. Clocks on the walls, clocks on shelves, a grandfather clock by the stairs, little brass clocks on the mantel, a white clock above the kitchen sink. None of them seemed to agree on the time. "They don't work anymore," Walter said when he saw me looking. "Margaret doesn't like throwing things away." Margaret gave a quiet laugh, but she did not look at him. Before they left, Walter handed me a sheet of instructions written in block letters. Feed the cat at 7 in the morning and 7 in the evening. Open the greenhouse for 20 minutes after lunch. Check the furnace pressure twice a day. Lock the front gate before dark. Do not go into the basement. I looked up from the paper. Basement problem. Damp, Walter said. Old things, Margaret added quickly. Boxes, tools, nothing useful. The last rule was written at the bottom, separated from the rest by a blank line. If the house phone rings, do not answer it. I read it twice because at first my mind refused to treat it like a real instruction. The house phone? I asked. Margaret looked at Walter. Just for a second, something passed between them. Not fear, exactly. More like the tired recognition of a subject they had practiced avoiding. The line is disconnected, she said. Then how would it ring? Walter smiled. It won't. That should have been the moment I handed back the list, made some excuse, and drove away. But I had half a tank of gas, less than $60 in my checking account, and a grown man's talent for ignoring warnings when money is involved. They left close to dusk. Their Buick rolled down the driveway slowly, brake lights flashing red through the gate, and then they were gone. I stood in the foyer with their instructions in my hand and listened as the house settled around me. At first, nothing happened. I heated up stew Margaret had left in the refrigerator, fed the cat, and checked the furnace. The cat's name was Milton. He was old and gray, with one cloudy eye and a way of moving through rooms without making a sound. He did not want affection. He simply followed me from place to place and sat nearby, as if judging whether I was doing the job correctly. Around 10 that night, while I was rinsing my bowl in the sink, something tapped the kitchen window. Not a crash, not even a knock. Just one sharp little sound, like a fingernail touching glass. The window looked out over the side yard. Beyond it were the greenhouse, the fence, and the pine trees. I turned on the outside light and saw only my own reflection staring back at me from the dark pane. I stepped onto the back porch with a flashlight. The air was wet and cold. A dusting of snow covered the ground, broken only by Milton's paw prints near the greenhouse. No footprints, no movement, just the slow creak of pine branches beyond the fence. I went back inside and locked the door. For the first time, I regretted taking the job. That night, I dreamed every clock in the house began ringing at once. Not chiming, ringing like dozens of small alarms trapped behind the walls. I woke with my heart pounding. The house was silent. Milton sat at the closed basement door, staring at it without blinking. The next morning, I decided to walk into town. I told myself I needed bread and coffee, but really I wanted to see other people. The woman behind the counter at the general store was friendly until I gave the address. When I said I was watching the Collins place, her smile went flat. "Black Hollow Road?" she asked. "That's right." She rang up my coffee and bread without another word. Outside, an older man in a faded Penn State cap caught up with me near the parking lot. He smelled like cigarettes and cold air. "You staying with the Collinses?" he asked. "Just watching the house for a few days." He looked down the road, not at me. "If somebody comes to the door after dark," he said, "don't open it, even if the voice sounds familiar." I tried to ask what he meant, but he had already turned away, moving slowly toward an old pickup with rust along the wheel wells. When I got back, the house felt different. Same furniture, same polished wood, same clean rooms. But now everything seemed arranged for a reason I did not understand. The clocks on the walls felt less like decoration and more like witnesses. That evening, Margaret called from her cell phone. Her voice was gentle, almost cheerful. She asked if Milton had eaten, whether the furnace pressure had dropped, whether anyone had come to the gate. I told her everything was fine. I did not mention the man at the store. Before hanging up, she said, "And if you hear anything upstairs tonight, don't worry yourself." I froze with the phone against my ear. "Upstairs?" I said. "You told me the upstairs rooms were closed off." There was a pause. "Old houses carry sound," she said at last. That night, I did not go to bed. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee gone cold, listening to the furnace click below me and the wind rub branches against the roof. Milton stayed near the basement door. Every so often, his tail twitched once. At 12:37, I heard footsteps above me. Slow, careful, one step, then another. They moved from the stair landing down the upstairs hallway and stopped somewhere over the living room. I did not move. At 25, I might have grabbed a flashlight and gone charging up there. At 50, a man understands that courage is not always walking toward the thing that wants to be found. Then the house phone rang. It sat on a small table beneath the hallway mirror, an old ivory-colored rotary phone with a coiled cord. I had noticed it earlier, mostly because it looked like a prop from another life. The ring was sharp and mechanical, loud enough to make my shoulders jerk. It rang 7 times. Then it stopped. Milton crouched at the basement door and hissed without making much sound. In the morning, I found an envelope on the kitchen table. It had not been there the night before. I am certain of that. Inside was an old photograph. Walter and Margaret stood on either side of a boy about 12 years old. He had dark hair, a thin face, and serious eyes. On the back, in blue ink, someone had written, "Don't leave him alone." I called Margaret immediately. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Walter's number did the same. That was when I broke the rule and went upstairs. The air on the second floor smelled of dust and old medicine. At the end of the hall was a bedroom that looked as if no one had touched it in years. A narrow bed, a shelf of children's books, a baseball glove on the dresser, model airplanes hanging from the ceiling on yellowed fishing line. On the wall above the desk was another photograph of the same boy. Under it was a small brass plaque, Thomas Collins, 1991 to 2004. I felt ashamed standing there. Whatever the Collinses were, this had been their grief. I had no right to be in that room, looking at the things they could not throw away. But fear does not care about manners. I went back downstairs and stopped cold. The front door was open. Margaret Collins stood on the porch. No coat, no purse, house slippers on her feet. The same pale sweater she had worn when I first arrived. "You're back early," I said, though I already knew she had never gone anywhere far. She did not look at me. She looked past me, toward the stairs. "Did he call you?" she asked. My mouth went dry. "Who?" "The one who comes when there's a stranger in the house." Before I could answer, something struck the basement door from the other side. Once. Then again. A heavy, flat slap against wood. I stepped backward. Margaret did not move. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Walter thought if we left a man here, someone around the age Tommy would be now. Maybe the house would stop reaching for us. For a moment, I did not understand. Then I understood too much. They had not hired me to watch the house. They had placed me there. Left me inside like an offering, or a replacement, or maybe just proof that their suffering could be handed to someone else for a few nights. I felt anger rise through the fear so fast it steadied me. I grabbed my coat from the chair and went for the door. Margaret did not try to stop me. She only said, "If he asks you to open it, don't answer." I ran down the driveway and through the gate. I walked nearly a mile along Black Hollow Road before an older woman in a minivan stopped and asked if I needed help. My hands were shaking so badly I could not zip my coat. She drove me to the gas station, and from there I called a friend to come get me. 2 days later, I returned with a deputy from the county sheriff's office because my bag and tools were still inside. The Collinses were gone. Their Buick sat in the driveway. Food remained in the refrigerator. Margaret's purse was on the kitchen counter. Walter's reading glasses were beside the living room chair. Milton was nowhere to be found. The basement door stood open. Behind it was an ordinary storage room. Canning jars, old skis, paint cans, a stack of cement bags hardened by moisture. Nothing else. No hidden room. No footprints in the dust. No sign that anyone had been down there at all. On the living room table, we found a note. One sentence, written in the same blue ink as the photograph. Now he knows your voice. The deputy read it twice and asked if it meant anything to me. I told him no. That was not exactly true, but I did not know how to explain the feeling that something in that house had listened long enough to learn me. I took my tools and never went back. I never learned what happened to Walter and Margaret Collins. A year later, I heard the house had been sold by some distant relatives. The new owners cut down the pines, replaced the fence, remodeled the kitchen, and threw away every clock in the place. Maybe they did the right thing. But some nights, when my apartment gets too quiet, I still find myself listening to the hallway outside my door. If a slow footstep comes from the stairwell, I stop breathing for a second and wait to hear whether someone will say my name. Age teaches you that the worst houses are not always the ones with ghosts. Sometimes the worst houses are the ones where the living have spent too many years refusing to let the dead rest. The lesson is simple. When someone else's grief feels wrong, keep your distance. Some people are not looking for help. They are looking for someone to leave behind in their place. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe. New true horror stories are uploaded every week. And remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that could happen to anyone.